So far with the Ahsoka series, Dave Filoni has succeeded at least in one thing. Whether you agree or not, it is a refreshing combination of the new and the old. As we see by these 3 episodes that were released up until now, you can kind of see elements of both eras. You can see by Senator Ziono, you can see the new, the fresh, Thrawn is coming, Morgan Elsbeth. Things are starting to heat up in the direction of the First Order. But also we see that Dave Filoni has succeeded in capturing what made Star Wars original back in the day when the Force, there was no mention of midichlorians. As you can see, Ahsoka specifically does not mention to Sabine anything about midichlorian counts, who can or cannot be a Jedi or a Force sensitive. Sabine, by all we know, she exuded hints of a Jedi Padawan or a Force sensitive. As far as we can see, she is not adept in the Force, and especially according to someone named Huyang. Now, again, whether you like the Ahsoka series or not, 2 characters have been the fan favorites so far. Baylan Skoll and Huyang have been adored by everybody all across the internet. While we have a lot to say about Baylan as well, so stick around, subscribe, because I'm gonna make a bomb-ass video about that too. We need to talk about Huyang today. His, for lack of a better term, badassery. He is no 3PO, he is no mere droid. He is Professor Huyang of the Jedi Order. He has not changed a bit. Even though the Jedi Order does not exist anymore, he still holds on to his programming. And as we can see, he is very direct and very strict. Does not give Sabine a hint of positivity or delusional support. He actually leaves that to Ahsoka. In yesterday's episode, we saw that Huyang wanted to entice Ahsoka to do something more for Sabine, support her, while he does not. He does not in the slightest. But I think that is entirely necessary. I think what Huyang is doing and what Dave Filoni is doing with this character is actually the tough love that Sabine needs right now. We're going to discuss why Huyang is extremely important in this series, in regards especially to Sabine Wren. So it all started with episode 2. So in episode 2, an injured Sabine Wren, she is still not healed even properly. Huyang goes on a tirade telling her that if she was to be inducted into the Jedi Order, she would have been the weakest and slowest Padawan out of them all. And he has trained many a Padawan. He practically tells her so. This was pretty harsh, but it was true. In this series, you'll get the truth. There's no coddling in this one. Later on in that same episode, we see Baylan Skoll literally tell Morgan Elsbeth it will be a pity to kill Ahsoka because there are few Jedi roaming around in the galaxy anymore, and when Morgan confronts him, he just says, it's the truth. So whether it be Baylan or Huyang, you can see that this series does not coddle its apprentices, even its foes. It all culminated with yesterday's episode for me because you can clearly see Sabine is trying her hardest. She is using a bokken against the holographic projection swords of Huyang, training with it. A bokken is a Japanese training weapon, and as she's trying her damnness to succeed, Huyang, without any regard, just tells her that it is not adequate as of right now. She is improving, but she is not yet where she needs to be. In the holographic projections, you can see where the strikes occurred. The bright lines indicate a more precise and perfect strike, whereas the orange ones indicate the weakest points where she swung her bokken. Again, I mentioned yesterday that this really reminded me of General Grievous, and I think this was, of course, done intentionally by Dave Filoni, a reference to it because 4 arms immediately you will think of General Grievous, 4 arms wielding lightsabers. And where it really culminated for me, again, as I said, is when Ahsoka recommends Zatoichi, and immediately Huyang, without a moment's thought, he tells Ahsoka, and Sabine for that matter, that she is nowhere near ready for that technique. So Huyang knows his Jedi training, and he knows when someone is ready and when he is not. So let's talk actually about what Huyang witnessed within the Jedi Order. By now, we know that Huyang's indicating that Jedi training was extremely rigorous throughout a Jedi's life. A Jedi trained intensely throughout their entire life, but what kind of training they would have, it would depend on their personalities and duties of each Jedi. There's a quote from Qui-Gon telling Anakin in one of the novels that it will be a hard life, one without reward, without remorse, without regret. A path will be placed before you. The choice is yours alone. Do what you think you cannot do. It will be a hard life, but you will find out who you are. Huyang knows that eventually, even though she is failing right now, Sabine will find out what type of a Jedi or Jedi Padawan she really is. Huyang is having difficulty placing her because she is so unorthodox. Huyang goes on to tell Ahsoka later on that there is a reason why there are so few Jedi Mandalorians recorded in Jedi history, because Mandalorians are so unpredictable they could not adhere to the dogmatic views and the practices of the Jedi Order. Then there's the education aspect. So Huyang has seen a lot of Padawans outside of lightsaber training as well. You see, Jedi also had specialized training in a variety of other subjects, including military history, diplomacy, science, investigation, ancient history, and sometimes, as we've seen, medical science too. They needed to be trained in resisting mind probes and interrogation techniques, because what if they're caught? Sabine has not gone through any of this training. The only training she has received is essentially lightsaber training with Kanan Jarrus previously. In some instances, training was so harsh and difficult that it consisted of nearly 2 decades of tutelage before any apprentice could even become a fully fledged Jedi Knight. Similar to Sabine, the impatience is shown in Anakin too. He could not wait to become a Jedi Knight, and he could not wait to become a Jedi Master. This is ultimately his downfall. A hint of Anakin's eagerness and darkness is shown in Sabine too, when Ahsoka easily trips her up. When she starts to comprehend her training with her visor, she makes a couple of good moves, and immediately she is thrown into the attack without being properly prepared, and Ahsoka easily trips her. This indicates that she is still not ready. I don't know if I should even include the Clone Wars era, because that was an erratic and crazy era, an era that Huyang is mostly known for. In fact, we have introduced to Huyang in the Clone Wars animated show. Even though Huyang was a millennia before the Clone Wars, he still made his name in that series. You see, during the Clone Wars, Padawans were instructed and taught to be competent commanders, considering how Republic clone forces were under Jedi command. We see this with, of course, Ahsoka. This is what ties everything together. Ahsoka, as a Padawan, knows that she was just thrust into a war as a very, very young woman. The Republic did not have a previous standing army, so its members had little or no military or battle experience, so they needed to learn on the fly. So as you can see, there was Jedi orthodoxy, but then there were Jedi who needed to learn on the fly. This means that Jedi trained constantly to keep up with the many requirements of the Jedi Order. Sometimes they needed to be diplomats, sometimes they needed to be warriors. But the how and what, that training was, as I mentioned earlier, dependent upon the personality and qualities of each Jedi and the necessary skills required for them to learn. This is a huge problem for Huyang to know about Sabine. Again, all Huyang sees in Sabine is an eager-to-fight Mandalorian. I think it's fair also to compare Sabine to a young Luke, especially Luke from A New Hope. As we see, she is receiving similar training to Luke with the visor. She is learning as quickly as she can because conflict is upon them. Luke had only a few weeks of training. Then he went on to face Vader and was pretty effortlessly defeated. Then there was some time in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which only then did Luke spend time studying Obi-Wan's personal effects, constructing his new lightsaber. We see that in Return of the Jedi, he is a Jedi. There is no question about it. How do we know this? Because during this time, he spent a lot of time practicing, honing what Obi-Wan and Yoda had taught him during those years quickly, and only then he managed to be on par with Darth Vader. It wasn't until Luke tapped into the dark side, into anger, that he was able to overcome Vader in the end. Luke is quoted as saying this: "Although I had been able to train with with two of the greatest Jedi Masters who ever lived, my lessons were learned in unorthodox ways while in the heat of battle against the Empire. When I began my own temple, I hoped to offer a more traditional path into the Jedi Order for my students. It is already apparent that Sabine is nowhere near her adequate training grounds. Luke would be able to train her in detail and slowly, whereas Ahsoka knows that they don't have the luxury of time and she needs to learn quickly and be ready for Shin Hati, because in episode 4 we see from the trailers that she will definitely fight Shin Hati, and Shin Hati provokes her, even tells her in the trailer that you have no power. This is why Huyang is important. Instead of supporting her or coddling her, Huyang knows that only through tough love, only through angering a Mandalorian will you get the best out of him. And this is why Huyang indicates in front of her that she is not yet ready for this technique or that part of the training. As I said, Huyang was many millennia old during the Clone Wars, having instructed Jedi in their training for over 1,000 generations, as Obi-Wan says. Befitting his age, Huyang had developed a personality possessed of great knowledge and wisdom. What makes him a great character is that he pairs all this with quirks such as a dry sense of humor and responses when his usefulness was questioned due to his age. I will close with this quote. After he is activated and at the ending of episode 3, when they say we almost died, he says standard Jedi protocol. He is the funniest out of them all. So I love that Huyang is in this series and he will go down as one of the best droids in Star Wars for sure. Tell me all your thoughts down below.